Hey cinephiles, welcome back to Couch Kernels, and before we get started on today's movie, I wanted to talk to you guys first about hype. I'm sure every one of you has felt hype about stuff before, but I've found personally that hype can kind of mess things up. I have a few examples. When The Hangover came out, for example, lots of people were saying it was the funniest movie they had ever seen, both the viewing public and the critics. Now, by the time I saw it, I really didn't think it was all that funny. I even went as far as to say I hate it. Not sure if that's true, but I have no doubt that if nothing else, hype sort of wrecked it for me since it couldn't live up to how it was being described. Another example would be the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die. Now, I love the Bond franchise. Have since I was a kid, and I was really looking forward to it. I watched it with my dad recently, but this was after it was being hyped as the best Bond movie ever, or at least the best of Daniel Craig's batch. And while I thought the movie was good, even ballsy, I don't think it was that good. And I was left slightly disappointed because of the hype train that had built up for it. Now you might be wondering where I'm going with this. Well, I'm going somewhere controversial.
Don't do that.
I do not like A Christmas Story.
It's not true. That's impossible.
I think, however, that it likely has something to do with the hype. People have been telling me for years, maybe even decades, that A Christmas Story is one of the best and funniest Christmas movies ever made, and I'll be honest, I just don't see it. It's quotable, for sure, entertaining, but very much oversold. I also remember seeing it everywhere at Christmas time as a kid and thinking I wanted to see it because I liked Stuart Little, and to me, the kid on the cover looked like Jonathan Lipnicki. I was definitely wrong, and it wasn't him. The movie was made before he was born. But I thought it was him. Anyway, I digress. A Christmas Story came out in 1983, and as long as I can remember, it's been something of an institution. But here's the thing. How many of you are aware there was a direct-to-DVD sequel released in 2012? I mean, technically it's the second sequel, but it pretends the other one never happened, so we will too. This sequel is very directly named A Christmas Story 2. And the point I was trying to make here is that I went into this one not really sure how to feel about it, having disliked the first one. So let's get into it. The criteria today are plot and writing, dialogue, visuals, soundtrack, and acting. So the movie takes place 6 years after the first one, even though it came out 29 years after, but I suppose when you recast everyone and set it in the past, it doesn't matter too much. Now, 15-year-old Ralph, whose hair looks terrible, is again at a point where he only wants one thing for Christmas. But this time, it's quite a bit bigger than a BB gun. He wants a 1939 Mercury Model 8 convertible. Like he did the first time round, he tries to seed the idea in his parents' heads, but ends up giving up pretty quick when his dad gets derailed by the B-plot. When his dad returns to warring with their rickety furnace. The B-plot here is actually just Ralph's dad fighting with the furnace, losing, getting mad about the cost of a new one, and asking contractors to let him know if a good used one comes available. He then kicks into a C-plot where he gets mad about the cost of the turkey for Christmas dinner, and decides to try and catch fish via ice fishing for the Christmas dinner. So the old man gets two whole plots, but they're both about him being cheap. Anyway, while this is going on, the car Ralph wants gets displayed at the used car lot, and Ralph figures he'll never get it now, so he decides to just sit behind the wheel one time. Then the salesman comes out to show a prospective customer the car. Panicking, Ralph tries to hide in the back seat, but his pant leg catches on the brake. He tries desperately to wiggle out of his pants to fix the problem, but ends up releasing the brake and the car slowly rolls out into traffic. Eventually it comes to a stop with a very small collision with a light pole, after which Ralph emerges from the back seat with no pants on. He happily points out that the car is totally fine, but then, as Hollywood would have it,
Coincidence? I think not!
A reindeer decoration falls from the top of the lamppost and wrecks the convertible top of the car. Ralph and his pals are then informed that the salesman won't have them arrested if they can just come up with the money for the repair in a week. So they get jobs, and we get an Archie Andrews level montage of them bungling all kinds of possible duties at the job. I liked how they set up the possibility here of just recycling the plot of the first one, but forged their own path. It was a decent story, even if it barely works as a Christmas story. Sorry. Anyway, let's give it a kernel. As I said before, the first movie is very quotable. You don't even have to have seen it to know the line.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
Some can even list off Ralph's entire description of the BB gun. This movie, however, isn't the same. There isn't anything here that's memorable, nothing quotable. The dialogue works to get the story across, but that's about all it's got going for it. It leaves this category discussion pretty light, but if there's nothing to discuss, there's nothing to discuss. We won't be giving a kernel for dialogue. Now, there really aren't any effects here, and I knew there wouldn't be, so I opted to just look at how the movie looks this time. The cars on display here are all gorgeous. I'm not really a car guy, so I'm not identifying anything wrong for sure, but it seems to me they are all at least appropriate for the timeline in which the movie is set. There are downfalls in this movie, of course, like later in the movie when the old man is ice fishing, they do an establishing shot of the lake and look to the sky and show a gaggle of geese flying south. Problem here, besides it being a bit late for them to be doing so, the birds look awful. Like, someone looked at Birdemic and went, "This is fine. You think we can get those?" And in case you didn't know, the Birdemic birds looked like this. On top of that, the actor playing Ralph has dark hair normally, so he has a dye job here to play his blonde character. But his hair came out the wrong color, and you can see his roots. His hair looks bad. But back on the positive side of things, everything looks like it ought to. Everything else. Some pretty heavy attention is paid to the details here, and it looks overall appropriately like the time period that it's portraying. So there are a few good things and a few bad, but the big picture parts all look good. Some of the little stuff looks bad, but hey, you nail the big stuff, I think we'll let you slide on the little stuff. Have a kernel. On to the soundtrack. There are a few cartoonish sound effects here again, but I can't remember for sure if that sort of thing was present in the original, so I can't speak to whether it's out of place. As for the bulk of the soundscape though, while it works, and works effectively, it doesn't really stand out. They didn't get the rights to use any big hits of the day or anything, but they also made the right-headed decision not to use any current hits of the time. Remember, this came out in 2012. We could have had the montage of Ralph and his friend's failures set to Party Rock Anthem.
Oh, Jesus, God, no.
Anyway, while it wasn't bad, it also wasn't memorable. No kernel here. Finally, the acting. Obviously, everyone was recast for this one. Peter Billingsley, who played Ralph in the first movie, was 41 at the time this came out, and it would have been a bit awkward to have him play a 15-year-old. And Darren McGavin, who played the old man, passed away in 2006, so reprising for the 2012 sequel wasn't really in the cards. So this time we have Braden LeMasters playing Ralph. See what I said about his original hair? Now, look at his hair for the character. Weird. Distracting. He plays the role well, though. Just as earnest and golly gee as Billingsley did almost 30 years prior. Daniel Stern plays the old man this time. He could have been making the direct release fifth Home Alone instead, but that would have been weirder since we already had French Stewart play his character in 2002. Stern looks nothing like McGavin here, and I'm not actually convinced they tried to make him look like the character at all. I also don't think he really played the character the same as McGavin did, but again, it's been a while since I saw the original. He is quite entertaining in it regardless, but hearing him spout indiscernible profanities at various points just made me think of Joe Pesci. And wonder why Stern is in here. Everybody plays well in here, and I enjoyed all the performances enough to award them a Kernel. Now let's tip out our bucket and see what we have. We have 3 Kernels. You know what? This movie has no real right to exist, mostly because nobody was looking at the original nearly 30 years later and going, you know what this needs? A sequel. Or, well, most people weren't. And as stated, I didn't really enjoy the first one, but I actually kinda liked this.
You're putting me on.
Not as a Christmas movie, because Christmas is less than Die Hard,
I was just blinded by the balls on that kid.
but it's somewhat enjoyable. Maybe because I have no long-standing love of the original to hurt how I feel about it? I don't know. I'd be curious if anyone who has seen the original also liked this one, so if that's you, let me know below. Now, let's move on to Name That Frame. This is a continuation of the round started in my Rudolph sequel video. You know, the one with the long title. I ain't saying it again.
Please.
If you look at my screen, we have a new still. Now, as stated in that other video, this is a Christmas movie, but by way of a hint, we'll say this one is a fantasy movie from the early 2000s. Do you know it? Comment below. And as always, if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down there too. I try to answer everything. Actually, I also want to take a quick second here to thank you all. It may not be a huge milestone to anyone else, but as of recording, I have over 210 views across my 7 videos, and I want to thank you all for watching me give my opinions on various movies. It means a lot. I also want to extend my thanks to Solemn for continually doing the edits I miss or just straight up can't do, either due to lack of proper software or lack of knowledge. I appreciate it, man. That's all from me, though, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!